reason beat yourself up because, you had one plan that in reality looked different. So that would be about the only thing to touch in on that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up actually. And, one of the things that you and I have been talking about over the past couple of years is how my audience maybe is a little bit different than the folks that you serve. So many people in clinical research, because we work in a really regulated industry, we don't identify ourselves as creatives. And in fact, it's almost dangerous in our industry to say that you're creative because we have very structured processes and procedures, and we're really expected to follow those. So I would love to hear, when you accepted this invite, what made you think I need to talk to those highly regulated, very formal people?
Well, part of what I wanted to talk about is, as I absolutely hear where you're coming from, especially about the label of being creative or visionary and things like that. But I think that can get a lot in the way because there are some tasks that we all do that are fundamentally creative kinds of tasks, and they might be surprising, right? So for instance, actually sitting down and creating the program management plan of whatever that looks like for your clinical trial is actually a creative project. Right, it actually requires that type of time. And yes, you might think, well, it's just putting dates together and doing all the pieces together, but it's fundamentally the same type of task as when we think about when kids create Lego structures, right? There are some constraints that they're working in and so on and so forth. But when we tell ourselves that we're not creative, or when we sort of block that off, I think we forget ways in which we can fully show up and as an integrated self. So Nadia, I always want to push back against this whole, like, I'm not creative. I'm in this highly regulated industry. I'm an engineer. I'm an architect, or, whatever that might be. It's like, actually, no, there's creativity in every job. And their creativity shows up in projects and tasks and just how we approach some of these hard conversations, how we think ourselves out of blocks. So that would be the first thing that I would want to talk about. But the second thing on that is I think even when we accept that so many of us may be on that manager schedule to where you're meeting with a lot of people and you look at your calendar and you're like, okay, I've got 17 meetings this week or interviews or whatever that might be. Underneath that is still the need for focus blocks to really think about how all this work ties together. Underneath that is the need for focus blocks for creating reports that actually are simple enough to get your message across. And we all know that the time that it takes to create a simple, compelling presentation versus the time that it takes to make one where you just word vomit everything up and hope someone catches it, takes way more time to do the former than the latter. But think about how many times you've been in that conversation where if you just would have taken more time to explain the data or what's happening more clearly, you would have saved yourself a lot of trouble. So again, I will accept that you may be on the manager's schedule. I will accept that in the industry, being known as a creative person may actually cause you some trouble. At the same time that I'll push back and say, you're still creative. Two, a lot of what you do taps into all of who you are. And three, you still need to be thinking about focus blocks. You still need to be thinking about doing the deep work that it takes to drive your projects and your career forward.
Yeah, thank you for your comments there. And you mentioned two things that I just wanted to attach to. One was restraints. As human beings doing this work, we are all restrained. We all have the same 168 hours a week, but we do need to show up even in our working hours as creative people because of the other word that you said, which was simplify. And in my career, I always thought bringing a little bit of color and flair and glitter to work would help me outperform others. It would help me get to the next level. But what I've really learned, and some hard lessons in the last 5 years, are, the more that I take away, the more that I simplify, especially in presentations, the way that you're explaining how difficult that project can be, that really requires a huge amount of creativity. And, I can't discount how long it takes to bring those projects forward. So thanks for your comments. I think everybody here who's on this call is part of a really special group. There's this rule in communities, Charlie, I know you know it. It's the 99-1 rule. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a good place to start. I just am letting people kind of come into the room. Actually, Melina's helping me moderate tonight. Melina, wave, hi.
Hello, everyone.
Melina's going to start a poll. So if anyone wants to just take a look at the poll that's going to pop up on your screen, and I'm just going to set up a little bit of an intro, and then we'll actually dive into our conversation. So if you've joined, don't feel that you've missed anything. Everything is being recorded, right, Melina? It's all being recorded? Yeah. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows you're in the right place. And so 90% of the people in any community, whether that's a church group, anything in your community, something on the internet, whether you're ants, building something in the animal kingdom, 90% of the people just kind of show up, right? They just kind of phone it in, they're going through the motions, and they're useful. Like, those beneficiaries are very, very important in communities. But in very powerful and well-functioning communities, we have this other 10%. And so what do they look like? And it's you tonight. So I just wanted to take a moment in gratitude and kind of thank everyone who is dialed in tonight after work on your own time to be a part of that special group, that 10%. And I'm just really honored and blessed. We have over 50 attendees registered this evening, and everyone will be getting the replay. So 9% of the people show up, and they're kind of, they're in it, they're interested, they're listening, they're liking, maybe a little comment here and there. But then there's this 1%, and I want you guys to really think about what it would look like if you were that 1% for me tonight, because it's actually not easy to get up here and do this for you, but I'm so excited about this content. So to be the 1%, participate in the chat, answer the polls, make some new connections. The 1% in a community are the one who amplify that message. So if you look at your Zoom link, you can actually share this with your network and let them know, I'm on a Zoom call with Nadia and Charlie. They're going to give me some knowledge bombs. We're going to learn about productivity. Be that person who helps me share our events and amplify the message that we're going to be giving you tonight. So Charlie, anything to add before we get started in our program?
No, well, besides thanks, right? I know you all have many other things you could be doing tonight. You have many other projects. You have many other demands on your time. So thanks for showing up tonight. And Nadia and I will do our best to make sure that it's worth your while.
We'll make it lively. And because I've got Melina here as my BFF in the chat, she's going to watch for any questions that come up. And so throughout the program, it is a conversation. It's not a webinar. So please just raise your hand. Melina can bring you up on screen. We can have your audio. There are a couple questions that came in pre-prepared. I want to try to get through those. And then we can just kind of open things up. I was targeting maybe about an hour. Does that work for your schedule, Charlie, to kind of hang with us for a bit?
Let's get it.
Great. Well, let's get started. So Melina, can you just confirm for me that the slides are showing in the window for folks? If not, yeah. So I got it.
And while we're doing that, Melina, Tamina, Marissa, thanks for being designated nodders tonight. Super useful to have those designated nodders. And so
helps a lot.
Right, it helps a lot. So thank you for being designated nodders.
Yeah, we've got some really great people on the call. So some folks I actually recognize. Oh my gosh, for Case here, this is like taking it way back to our original Elevate program where we did peer mentoring for clinical researchers. God, that was a long time ago. And Melina, she worked with me for 3 years on launching a podcast. So that was a really exciting project. And I've seen some new faces as well, but there's Karen, Michael, Jennifer's here. Jennifer actually hosted the entire Start Finishing series that we did to get us to tonight. So for folks that don't realize this, we actually did a productivity masterclass for the last couple weeks. And it was such a success that we want to bring it back. So we'll do another session in September to make sure that people have momentum on their important projects. Sandra's here, Megan's here. They're actually going to be hosting that class with me. And they're my peers in the Productive Flourishing Academy, which is a place where we go to kind of grow our skills as creative leaders. So let me get started just telling you a little about GCP Cafe. So if you're here and you've never met me before, I want to let you know that I run a community for clinical researchers. We're almost 10,000 around the world. We have an active Facebook group and we do these events. They're called virtual coffees and we try to do them after work. But I wanted to find time to make these successful. So I found Charlie's method. I actually was a part of his book launch team. The book is called Start Finishing. So even if you haven't read the book, you're still going to get something out of tonight. But I want to let you know that Charlie has a lot of free services and things available at his website. Melina, if you have that link handy, you could pop it in the chat. So Productive Flourishing team have provided us, and actually they'll provide you as well, with a monthly planner, a weekly planner, a daily planner. All of that is free. You can get on their email news list, and you can also receive the podcast, the blog articles. They have a free learning library called the Productive Flourishing Academy, and you can actually join up as a member there as well. So you can actually join the membership level. So I just wanted to highlight that we're completely separate organizations, but everything I do in Cafe is influenced by what I've learned from my friend Charlie Gilkey. And so when he finally delivered this book, I said, that's great, where's the next one? Because it's like, this is good, but now I want to take it to the next level. So I would definitely recommend picking up a copy of Start Finishing. Get the physical copy because you're going to want to like mark all over it. It's actually a required reading in the GCP Cafe Leadership Library. So we're pretty much entirely volunteer run at GCP Cafe. At any given time, we have about 20 volunteers working on between 3 to 5 projects. But we do these projects in the margin. We work evenings outside of work, and we work on the weekends, usually for 2 to 3 hours. So a volunteer makes a commitment of about 1 to 2 hours every other week. And they work with us for 8 to 12 weeks. And then they go on a coffee break, or they start another project. We call them baristas. So you'll get an invitation to be a part of the volunteer program, but we try to make as much of our content free and available because it is entirely volunteer run. So Charlie, do you want to talk a little bit about the work you've done in the past decade at Productive Flourishing?
Yeah, it's a broad question, or a broad sort of setup there, but what I would say is where we get super fascinated, myself and my team, is how do we take this native brilliance that we all have, these gifts, the resources, the community, and put them together, a little bit of focus, a lot of grit, a lot of heart, to really become the best versions of ourselves and to create the best version of the world that's right in front of us. That's really what we do. That is the common denominator. You know, I work with executives. I'm an executive and business coach, so I work with executives. I work with entrepreneurs. I've been doing much more work with nonprofit executives. And then there are the resources that Nadia mentioned. And it's funny, Nadia, because there are 2 more books that are currently competing with each other right now, right? So I'm having great conversations with my publisher about which one's next and how that works out. But you know, I don't think that message is going to change anytime soon. It's always going to be, how do you, like you, I'm pointing at you, do the best that you can with the resources that you have to spend this one precious life you have in ways that you're proud of and that makes the world better.
That's a very good place to start. And I think it kind of takes me to my first question as well, which is, why do this work? Right? Why, after you already have your full-time job, your commitments to your community and your family, why would you then pick additional creative projects? And I know for me, you know, it's about contribution. I feel that as a trial manager, I can help a couple hundred patients, maybe a couple thousand patients. But if I can help other trial managers be more effective, there's that amplifying effect. And so I want to be able to contribute more, which is why I kind of click my heels and get up early on the weekends to work on this project. But I think one of the things that came up in the masterclass series that we did is, why do you do these projects? Is it to get to the next project? Or are you getting some kind of gratitude? And I think that was a question that was really hard for me to answer because it just naturally comes to me to do the projects. But maybe you could talk about, why should we make time for our important work and contribution?
Well, there are several reasons why. So I'll talk about the gain and I'll talk about the pain, right? But I'll start with the pain because most of us are more familiar with that, right? The pain is what I call creative constipation, right? You have all of these ideas going on. You're taking in all of these things. There's all these things you should do. And unfortunately, a lot of our jobs don't provide a full container for us to do all the things that we want to do, right? And honestly, putting that type of expectation on your job, it's much like when you're in a romantic partnership and you put all of your emotional needs on that person. That's like not great, right? That's going to end up in a lot of tension. But unfortunately, I think we do that with our jobs sometimes. Like, it's got to feed all of the buckets and it can't. It's an unrealistic expectation. And so to answer the question on that side, Nadia, it's like, you've got to realize that if you're not making room for some of these projects that truly matter to you, you're going to go down destructive routes, right? That creative constipation, that toxicity is going to show up, and you're going to start destroying things because your creative energy, it creates or it destroys, right? And so it can destroy in the sense of you'll create terrible stories about yourself. I call that head trash, about what you can't do, and you're lazy, you're a procrastinator, you don't have the courage, and all those sort of things, right? But unfortunately, well, sometimes that's the first place we go, sometimes the last place we go. But we can get frustrated because our family and our friends are not supporting us in our creative endeavors, and they don't care, and don't they see that it matters? So we'll start destroying that.
Yeah.
Or we'll start destroying our money because we're unsatisfied, and so we'll go through shopping, or we'll buy a bunch of stuff, and whatever it takes to fill that hole, right? So one reason to focus on these types of projects is just because that pain creates an emotional debt that will always come due, right? So are you going to get ahead of it? Or are you going to wait until it gets so high that it sort of, you start, burning things down? So that's the pain side of it.
Before we go into the gain, you're just reminding me of this quote from Brene Brown, which I know that you're familiar with, but she says, unused creativity is a cancer. It metastasizes. And when I read that, it really spoke to me. And I said, yeah, I have to do this work because it's who I am as a person. Number one, it'll change the industry, but number two, I can't be a person who has the pain of all that unfinished work. So it's easy for me to want to finish my projects. But
Yeah.
talk to me about the positive stuff. What are the gains of getting to the other side of done?
Yeah, I'm going to hang out here for just a second, though, because there's a reason I started with yourself, right? Because this is going to make Nadia uncomfortable,
Being
because it's
seen.
easy. It's easy for especially women in our society, in the way that we socialize women, to always focus on contribution and service to other people.
Wow.
Without forgetting that they have needs themselves, without forgetting that you have your own creative spark that needs to be tended, without creating that you have your own, without like really taking the fact that you have your own dreams, you have your own desires, that's separate from the service that you do for other people. So that's actually why I started there, as opposed to contribution. I would say contribution for so many people is the easy answer. And it's the one that, if you're not careful, will actually disrupt you from doing your best work. Because
Probably
you're,
always catches me hiding,
yeah,
behind some kind of a story about why I'm doing what I'm doing. But yeah, I'm a very creative person, and for myself, I want to feel that I'm worthy to do this work, and that I have a message that's unique, that only I can deliver at this time. And so I think there's a lot of like self-worth that has to go into doing this type of work. It requires being unaccepted by others. It requires actually being disliked. It's funny, I gave a talk just a month ago, and I got the feedback survey, and of course 4 people said it was terrible, it did not meet the mark, they were not happy, they wanted their money back. It was a free event. But and I sent that to actually my friend Sandra, and she said to me, oh wow, you only pissed off 4 people, like you didn't go big enough. And so I think that's the fun thing that we kind of stumble on as creators, is you cannot be everything to everyone. And there's going to be a lot of people that stand up and try to get in your way when you're doing your creative work, but do not let yourself be one of them. Don't let yourself stand in the way of you doing your work. And so Charlie knows me pretty well. And for years, I thought it was kind of cute to say that I didn't have a calendar. I was like, oh, I have to use a calendar at work. So for my creative work, I won't use a calendar because it's unstructured and it's fun. And look at me, I'm so creative. I can't possibly work with constraints. But I think what I've learned, what he's kind of battered into me, is those constraints are very, very helpful. And if I feel that my work is important enough to do, then I will use this system because I'm good enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. But it's a kind of a gift to myself. So when I am using the Momentum Planner and these materials, I actually feel like it's a bit of a self-care ritual. It's it's worth it to me to carve out 2 to 3 hours a week for my creative projects, and I deserve that time. And I just communicate that with people in my life, that that's a boundary for me. But it does feel really, really good. to deliver, but what feels even better is kind of measuring my progress along the way and having these artifacts. So yes, I mean, the celebration, the victory lap is great, but being able to strike things off along the way is pretty huge for me. So
Yeah.
thank you for pointing that out, Charlie, that I was.
We have a comment in the chat here.
Sure, Melina, what have we got?
It says, why do we avoid tending our own passions? Is that avoiding responsibility?
It's almost like they knew where I was hoping to go next with Charlie. So we didn't talk about gains, but with your permission, I would like to maybe chat about myths of success, because we're still kind of like thrashing here. And I'd love to have you kind of riff for a bit on basically like the entire first third of your book. If you could just do that in like
Just
2
do
to
that.
5 minutes,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Well, I mean, I should have told you up front that actually part of my job tonight, like, yes, thanks for being here, let's have fun, but it actually is to constructively frustrate you, right? Because all of us, no matter who we are, we've all taken something that truly matters to us, an idea, a project, and we put it away in that sort of closet of the soul for some time in which it'll be a better time to work on. Like maybe when it's not COVID times, or maybe when the country's not falling apart, or maybe when I have the money or a better boss, or when this project's over, like we keep stuffing stuff in there. And at a certain point, you know that you don't have to keep it in there. You know that you can pull it out, and you know that you would probably feel better to pull it out. And to go to the question at hand, the thing about doing your best work is that, well, let me look at it this way. I'll answer the question, why don't we tend to our own needs?
Yes.
Start there. Well, because it turns out that, and again, I'm not going to go on too much of a feminist rant here, but I will say this. We socialize women to be the supporting actors in other people's stories, right? Whenever you start claiming your own space and saying, I'm doing a thing, and y'all can figure out whatever the hell y'all need to do, turns out people get upset. That disrupts the order and the precedence of the relationships that we're talking about. Like, no one gets pissed at you if you do what they want you to do, right? You don't have to have uncomfortable conversations if you're playing along with everybody else's plans for you. However, when you're carving out time for yourself, when you are investing in yourself in a certain way, it can make people uncomfortable. So faced with, and especially in the context of side projects, which I'm still riffing on that, Nadia, like it's like you've already done the work all week. You've already done all of the negotiations that you've had to do with all of these meetings, and then you got to go home and do it? Nah, it's easier in some ways. Right, to just be like, okay, I'll just go with the flow. I'm tired. I don't have it in me right now. So one of the reasons that we don't tend our own thing is because we have, I sort of frame this in the book as a no-win scenario, right? So no-win scenario number one is success will wreck my relationships, but we haven't really talked about success yet. But in the context of what we're talking about, taking care of yourself, prioritizing yourself will create disruptions in your relationships. That's the story that we hold on to, right? So again, one of the reasons we don't is because we don't want to do that, right? The second thing is when we start doing some of these projects like what we're talking about, the reality is if you're doing your best work, you might fail. You might end up in a position to where you have no idea what the hell you're doing, and you're stuck in the middle where you don't know what you're doing, you don't know your way out, and there's that risk there that it requires you to really show up in that way. And in our professional space, many of us have adopted the sort of zero defect or like the absolutely perfect posture, because if I show any mistake, then they're going to come after me, or, I'm going to get talked over, or I'm going to get in trouble, and so on and so forth. So when we transfer that way of being in a career, which by the way, I don't think is the best way of going about it. But anyways, when we transfer that to our own personal work, we're scared to, one, commit to ourselves and do all that work I just talked about, and to do it for something that might not work, right? That's a lot of work, y'all. Right? It really, really is. And so when you really start playing it out, right, it's natural why we as creatures who love to maintain the social equilibrium around us, and as creatures who, given the option, will likely take the shortcut. It's an easier reason why we end up not doing some of this work, because frankly, it's harder. And I'm not going to try to tell you like it's not hard, because it is, right? And still worth doing. So those are two reasons. I could go through all the success myths, but related to that question, that's really what I would want to peg on, and just say that's really what's coming up.
Yeah, I don't know why they'd buy the book if you just gave it all away. Buy the book. So, well, you did say something about story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this might actually be a good place to take us back to the gain conversation. So I have a vision quest that I go on. So I now actually start all my projects the same way. There's basically a checklist. I don't have to make it up. It reduces the friction of getting started. So that's something I learned, not just when I like leave a project to come back to it after a long time, which is kind of like a quick start ritual. I have a fresh start ritual as well. And there's a whole chapter, guys, in here about rituals, and it's phenomenal. And I was like, oh, I already know about rituals. That's not going to interest me. But it ended up being one of my favorites, creating a time and a space to do your work. But I do this thing, and I talked about it in the class. A lot of people were interested. It's a kind of a guided visualization, so it's a little bit woo. But I actually have a journaling, like a set of prompts. And it's funny because it popped up for me last night. I think it just knows, like my journal is electronic, so it knows like when it's time to start new projects. I also probably have a timer on it that I forgot that I set, but it said, hey, it's time to journal about Nadia on her big, fantastic journey. And I just laughed because I was like, oh, I was supposed to send this to people in the class. So if I was supposed to send that to you, just put in the chat, yes, like a big yes, if you want to receive that journaling prompt. But when I'm preparing like a talk, for example, that's a type of project I can finish, in 8 to 12 weeks. I've done it before. I kind of know what I'm going to face along the way, but I still do this prompt. And so I make myself the hero in my own story. And I think it's something that you can do with a pencil and a piece of paper. You can walk away and do this journaling exercise, but it's so profoundly helpful. Like, I'm not a person who asks for help because I'm perfect and I am flawless. Like Charlie said, at work, we get promoted by outperforming others. But unfortunately, there is a place where there's a gap between what you're capable of and what you want to do. And so this exercise really helps me because I can anticipate people that would try to derail me, including myself, and then patterns that would get in the way of what we consider. Actually, it's funny, at GCP Cafe, when we start our projects, we say, what would minimum success be, what would moderate success be, and what would epic success be? We took that right out of the book. I think it was like chapter 3. But we actually have that as part of our checklist. But for myself, for my projects, so I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the gain. And it's so funny because I think, oh, the project will be successful when I stand on stage and I deliver that talk. But I can tell you, having done this, having used this method for the last couple of years, the joy comes from actually knowing I'm prepared to go on stage. Like, it doesn't even matter how the talk goes because I know how much work I put in to get there. And so I always just can say to myself, if you take this message, great. If you leave this message, great. I have accomplished something because I arrived. Like, I'm here and I'm ready. And I used my time effectively. So I don't know, in that way, I feel like by doing my work, I'm the hero, even if I don't deliver.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I'm just going to crib directly from Dan Pink in Drive. So he sort of lists in Drive 3 primary drivers for us humans, all of us: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. It turns out, to sort of riff on what you were just saying, Nadia, that preparation, that getting ready and that showing up, that's mastery,
Okay.
right? At play, right? Just getting better at something and being a better version of ourselves is a core driver for many humans, right? Purpose, doing something, no matter how quickly or how well you do it, but that truly matters, is a core driver. And autonomy, being able to do your thing in your way on your own time, are, again, core human drivers here. So regardless of any of the external wins that we like to focus on, aside from like the service and the contribution and the success and the raises and the promotion and all of that list, I actually want people to focus more on this internal list of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Because if you commit to showing up to build those three, everything else becomes sort of like icing on the cake, right? And it turns out that the more you focus on autonomy, mastery, and purpose, the more of those success you get, more of those successes you get anyways. It's when you try to focus on external success and external metrics that are divorced from those three things for you that you end up on the struggle bus, right? And that you end up on, with one of those projects that you can't quite commit to, but you can't quite let go of either. It's probably because it's not really going into that autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And, I would also put in that sort of mix, whether we put it under one of those, but that's where we start looking at curiosity and creativity that also go in there that can be a part of either autonomy or mastery, depending upon which way you look at it. So those are the true gains. Those are the gains I want everybody. And so if not able, let me point it out, like, especially early in a relationship, it's like, Charlie, I don't care about that. I care about the things. I want the speech. I want the things like that. And it's like, okay, cool. But like, also think about this. And, part of our evolution is sort of realizing, wait a second, when I focus on those things, no matter what happens, I'm in flow. I'm happy. I'm building a group of people around me that are really supportive for what I'm doing. No matter what happens, I'm already winning, right? Everything else becomes secondary. So those I think are the true gains, but then you get sort of that normal list of things we care about in our culture of, money and success and, people liking you and all those types of things.
Yeah, I love the group. So nobody wants to read a book with a hero that just goes alone, right? Like, and then I did this, and then I did that, and then I was victorious. You want to read a story where the hero struggles and like face plants a little, and makes an unexpected ally. And so that's why the Vision Quest is so helpful for me, because it makes me kind of take a look at who's in my network and who's going to be with me in that journey, and what are they going to look like, and what role are they going to serve. But then, like you said, at the end, I have these stronger relationships because we've been through a journey together. And it's not just the project and the deliverable. It's, it's that whole kind of, this was meaningful. This was a good use of my time and my energy and my attention, which we learned in our class is a project. So.
Yeah. Well, Nadia, and to your point there, like, I don't use all of the tools that we create at Productive Flourishing because some of them are super native, but the project scoper is one that I use anytime that I start kicking off a project. And it's just a tool that we've started to use more and more. But the thing that I use the most of that is actually who are my success back and who are the people that are part of this project. And before I even commit to the pathway or anything like that, I've got a collection of 12 to 20 people. And for me, that's what makes it fun. Right? If I can't think of 12 to 20 people that I can't have a blast with on some of these types of things, I know that when everything else that I got going on, that project is going to lose the cage match because I'm going to have this other project over here where I get all of my friends and all of my buddies or all of the people that are super jazzed about it to get involved in it. And it's not just my own animus. It's not just my own spirit that's in this project. It's other people's. And so it's a very similar sort of thing, as you said, Nadia, is when you go on a journey, like I want so many of us to learn how to convert how problems into who solutions.
Wow.
Turn how problems into who solutions. Don't be that person that's thinking, I got to figure out how to do everything by myself before I can ask people to help me. Because when you do that, you basically go to someone with a plan that's already done or an idea that's already done, and you're basically asking them, is it good or not? You're not really asking them to join you on the journey, right? But when you get stuck and you're like, you know what? I don't know how to have to do this. That's not my job. My job is to collect the team of Avengers or whatever your sort of group of people is around me. So I'm like, hey, I don't know how to do that, but those three people do. And I'm going to go ask them because then they feel seen. That's the thing we forget about that. When we ask other people to help using their unique contributions, they feel seen. It ties into their purpose. It ties into their mastery, right? As opposed to when we deny them the chance to share their unique contribution with us. Right. So I definitely want to push on it. I want to frustrate some people here because the whole thing is a lot of us approach asking for help as it's either a taking from somebody or it's creating a debt that we'll have to pay. It's got this really negative, weighty energy. So no luck. I mean, no reason why we would avoid that. Right. But what if asking for help is really a moment to really see someone and honor their best work, their contribution, what they can provide to the world? What if it's just an opportunity for someone to give you a gift that maybe they've been waiting on the right opportunity to give you, or they just didn't know where it was going to come in? What if we shifted some of this energy so that when you approach your group, your success pack, which is what I call them, it's always coming from a place of that excitement, that joy. And if they don't have the resources to help you right now, it's not because you suck or it's less than or they're not a friend. They got their own thing going on. You can come back, right? If you approach it with great energy, you can always come back, right? It's only when you ask for help in a way that's actually a demand that you end up in these weird relationships where you ask for help, but you demand someone help you and they can't right then, and then you get your feelings hurt and it messes up the relationship. But if it's a true gift, it doesn't work at that time. Come back 3 months later. Come back a year later, right? You might find that person is ready.
Yeah,
I wanted to riff on that because I think when we use the word help or support, or we think about concepts like that, so many people go to that negative space about it that it feels like a whole friggin' project to learn how to ask for help. And they're like, screw it, I'll just do my project myself. I don't need this other thing on top of it. But what if it was something different?
Thank you for reframing that. It was hugely important for me to learn that lesson. When I listed those 20 people and I categorized them and color coded them and stalled on asking for help from them, I realized that asking for help isn't for them to do things for me. It's not for them to necessarily be my hands. Sometimes people can be that center of contribution, that heart. People can be your guide. They can be your eyes. So if you have 20 people that you want cheering you on, it doesn't mean that they're actually doing tasks for you. And we can circle back to that. But Melina, would you just let me know what's coming up in the chat right now?
Yeah, there's a lot of comments on this. It's a great topic. Violet said, wow, the thing I avoid more than doing work is giving other people work. I cannot imagine putting together the success pack. Gives a new lens. Janie said it, this gives a new lens for networking, exchange of opportunities. Marissa said, or we ask for help because we feel insecure or insufficient in our own skills or knowledge. Energy is everything. Stay out of the negative space, says Rike.
Amazing. Well, I definitely wanted to shift gears a little bit, Charlie, because I noticed we're right at like the half hour, and we did talk a lot about like strategy and getting to your best work. But let's say you've picked a project, and in fact, a lot of the folks who showed up for the last couple of weeks have picked pretty ridiculously huge projects. And some of the examples were a gal who's renovating her house. There was someone who was creating a garage in her backyard. Somebody else was making a garden. And then there was this one girl, and I apologize, well, she'll remain nameless, but she was preparing a Toastmasters speech. And I said, oh, that's, I know how to do that because I've done talks. So here's how you do it. Here's the steps. And she's like, oh, no, the talk is done. I just am refusing to rehearse it. And it's due. Like, I have to actually go give the speech, and I know exactly how many hours I would need to rehearse it. I'm ready to rehearse. I don't know why I'm blocked. And Charlie, I wonder if you could speak to that girl tonight. Why would somebody do all that work and prepare, and then at the last minute, not put those final dominoes in place? Do you see that happen a lot in your coaching?
Yes, I do. I see it happen. I realize I said I wasn't going to keep going there, but I see it happen with my female clients more than my male clients. Right. Yeah. And I think part of what it is it goes back to no-win scenario number 3, actually, which is If I'm successful, then I'll have to live up to that again.
That's heavy.
Right. And so some people are so like, and it's a weird thing, right? We don't talk about this nearly enough, which is why we're talking about it now, is if you perform at that level of mastery and success, and it takes that amount of work and it takes that amount of sort of investment to do it, that creates a new standard for you that then it's hard to commit at that level about other things. And so in some ways, it's kind of like, I don't know how many of you had this experience when you're in junior high, or maybe you have a teenager, right, that's in that age group. Like, they know once they start making a bunch of A's that sets a standard for what they can do, right? A C is no longer a good score, or a good grade for them. A B is no longer good. They have to get A's. That creates a new standard of success. And at a certain point, we think, and I really, really disagree with the statement that's picked up, is that how you do anything is how you do everything. I actually think that's epic bullshit.
Wow.
Right? I think we do some things that we really care about at a certain level of excellence and prioritization. And then I think if we're really being compassionate with ourselves, we can be acceptably mediocre at other things, right? And just say, I'm not going to be good at that. That's not where I'm going to invest my energy in being right. Like, look, I'm never going to be the best housekeeper ever. Right? I'm not going to obsess over that. It's going to be good enough, right? And Angela and I can have constructive conversations about what good enough means, right? But it's not one of those things where I'm going to spend hours of my day being fantastic at that. I've accepted that I'm going to be acceptably mediocre at email management. My clients know, like, if you need that coach that's going to email you back and forth and do all that, I'm not your guy. If you want a guy that's incredibly present and can do what I do in a session, I'm that guy, right? And if you need that other guy, go find that guy or that person that's going to do that. So I've just accepted I'm not going to spend 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day having inbox zero and giving the best answers via email. Not doing it. So I think part of what goes on in a scenario like that is they can't see that in this project, I'm really going to go after it and do my best and see what happens. But it doesn't mean I have to change my life. It doesn't mean that I have to change how I view myself. It could just be this thing that I want to run at an epic level for. Like, I don't have to live my life on epic across the board. So I think that's what comes up so often, is that the amount of work that it takes to truly excel in something can seem overwhelming. And so we don't do it. The other thing is, so many of us have gotten that thrill, that eustress, from waiting until the last damn minute and then being able to knock it out of the park anyway, right? That it creates this weird level of excitement that we may not have in other parts of our life. And so it's kind of like a performance high that we can engineer for ourselves. Because if you've truly, truly mastered a speech, or you've truly, truly mastered that, you're going to have stage fright before, right? Because that's just a natural thing of giving speeches, but it's not going to be that big high. It's not going to be that big adrenaline sort of rush about things. You're going to show up, you're going to do your work, you're going to do well, people are going to clap, you're going to get the 4 people who didn't like it, right? It's actually pretty predictable. And when we're craving novelty, when we're craving that high, predictability is not what we're actually going after. So we actually optimize and get out of that because we want to feel that high.
So much there for me to respond to. But the word mediocre is something I was kind of attaching to. I think, we're taught that mediocrity, or, just getting it done, moderate, especially as somebody who is always like an overachiever, that mediocre is a bad word. But actually, doing some things mediocre and some things badly, like doing things poorly, is how we grow. Like, if you just do the things that you do well, then you don't get to have those new experiences and new horizons. So thank you, for always giving me permission to try things imperfectly. And that's kind of what I heard there, is you can be epic in some areas and some projects without having to knock it out of the ballpark. It's okay to fail wildly on some things. Probably don't want to fail on everything. But if you have enough success to build on, that's kind of what we talked about in our class. When we say momentum, it's if you get enough rings on your belt, every project doesn't have to be wildly successful. And that's something that I teach my team as well is, our projects start and they end. We care about them enough that we'll put time on the calendar to do them. But they will not always have the impact that we intended, which is why we measure our time spent on the projects versus how did this delight our audience? Because it's better for my team to feel like they're victorious on a project that failed than get all the way to the end of the 12 weeks and say, that was terrible, I'll never volunteer with you again. All of our projects are useless. So Melina's like shaking her head because she's been on a lot of failed projects with me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things like, let's think about music, especially in the 90s, right? We live in a different era of music where the singles are hits, but remember when like we used to listen to an album and maybe had 10 songs on it, and like if 2 or 3 of them were like really good, that made a great album. Yeah. Right? We could think about it. There are a few albums we can go there, but like every song was great, but really you only needed 2 or 3 to make that album work. Right. And I think as I was going to say creative professionals, but I didn't want people to say that's not me. But you know what I mean by creative professionals. Like as professionals, I want us to think more about like a year as a series of like songs that you're putting out or projects that you're putting out. Not everyone is going to be your hit. Not everyone needs to be your hit. But if you don't do enough creation, if you don't get out there enough, you won't know what your hits are. And the thing about it is, whether we're talking music or whether we're talking in our profession, it's really hard for us to predict what's going to be our hit. It really is hard, right? So we just got to keep going to, keep making those songs, keep getting those projects done. And if over the course of a year, you had sort of like 3 standout projects that really mean something and like did some work for you, that's fantastic. You know how many people don't have that, right? They're not even putting out songs and projects. They're just kind of getting by. So again, Nadia, people get all on me because they're like, it seems like, Charlie, you're just wanting people to like, phone it in and, not play their best game. It's like, that's not at all true, right? I just want us to go into it so that we don't have to win every damn time, because it keeps us from growing. It keeps us from trying. It keeps us from being vulnerable. And it keeps us from building that hit, so that when you look back 5 years or 10 years, right, you're not going to remember all the songs that no one cares about. You're going to remember those 3 out of every album, and you're going to have enough of them that becomes the story of your career. That becomes the story of your work.
The overnight success. You just wake up one day and look at what you've accomplished. No, no, you have to work at it for years. And I think that's why this method works for me, because even at the end of a year like 2020, and Charlie and I sat together and we did momentum planning in the beginning of the year. We had a vision for what that year would look like what are the major projects I want to deliver in 2020? And then 2020 happened. And a lot of people say, oh, well, when we get back to the new normal, I'll start back on those projects. Who cares? I mean, you have this time, and it's a precious gift. And I think the time to innovate and do your creative projects is now. If you can find that time in your life, despite 2020, you can still do work that takes you further on your professional journey. And so that's something I just want to make sure. It's September. Hello, that happened. August ended. I don't know if anyone has a calendar. I do now. We still have time. If you're on this call, just hear me. You still have time to do like another project. Charlie says do 5. I think 1 is fine. Janie's laughing. Janie and I just had a conversation for about 3 hours yesterday about how we would do no new projects for the rest of the year. So she might be actually crying as well.
I'm here for it, man. Here, and Nadia, you got to remember, because you don't hear me on this one, it's no more than 5 projects. You forget the no more than.
I'm pretty sure you said I was allowed to have 5 with children. Like
you're allowed to have no more than 5. So yes, which means you can do 0.
Let's
0
play the tape.
Is no more than 5. I'm just saying.
There are a couple slides here that I prepared that I didn't go through, and I don't think I can actually get this thing to advance. But there's a funny project here I'm going to pull up. What I was saying earlier is that my entire team is required to learn about this book, whether or not but I actually purchased them all a copy of it. And if you do join GSP Cafe, of course, that is, you'll learn this method as well. But I just wanted to show one person specifically from my team, and there's a lot of people here. Sally. Sally's on the call right now. She's on my website and the call. Darren, some of the original folks. We've been doing this for a long time, but this is Grace. Charlie recognizes this one. She really surprised me this year. So Grace was the project leader for a community that we wanted to create on Facebook with an avatar. Her name is Fiona, and Fiona is the main character in my book. And I was like, I'll never deliver this book in 2020, but I can make a puppet and put her in the group, and she can start answering questions for people. So yeah, if you're interested in Project Fiona, just write Fiona in the chat. But it was so funny because Grace and I started using this method we ran 8 different meetings. Again, it was like a 12-week project. And at the end, we did deliver Fiona. She has a Facebook page. She participates in the group. She does polls. But then Grace really surprised me because she said, yeah, I got to go on a coffee break. I just don't have a lot of time right now. I'm starting a new job. I still want to be a part of your leadership team, but I don't really want to be a project leader. And I said, oh, that's fine. We have coffee breaks, right? She's like, no, I still want to be a part of it. And so then she sent me this picture. And she's like, by the way, I also got married. And so it was just kind of funny that she wanted to show me that she's using this method, not just on her creative projects and her work projects, but I love that my team has kind of embraced this. And I feel like the skills that we learn at Cafe are really applicable to our work. And this was just a cheeky thing that Grace did because she's hilarious. But I just wanted to show at least one person in my leadership team. Janie's here tonight as well, and Jennifer. So
yeah, books are fun. You never know where they're going to go.
They just surface
never
in the
know
wild.
where books are going to end up.
For anybody who did miss the series, we're going to offer the replays available. So actually, Tamina's here. She's going to help me get the links and the follow-up out after this call. So just so if you want to learn these foundations in a structured format, we offer that course by video. But the foundation of that course really was figuring out what is a project. Everyone has to pick a project. And I thought we could go back to success packs. Mm-hmm. So maybe it would make sense to riff on this a little bit. You talked about how if we don't do our best work or even our mediocre work, that we've taken something from ourselves. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what we've taken from our success pack. Who are these people? What's a guide? What's a beneficiary? Would you chat a little bit about this?
Yeah, so the easiest way to talk about success packs is to start about who they're not. Okay, they're not the naysayers and the derailers that exist around you. Far too many of us, I think, put these people on our teams and success packs, hoping that we can win them over, right? We'll show them and so on and so forth, but not those people. These are your yay sayers. These are the people who already believe in you, already got your back, want you to win because you're a part of a community that supports each other in that way. So 4 different types of people, and it's easiest, I think, to use some body metaphors here. So your guides are the people that you pull on because of the way they view the world. So you're pulling them on for their eyes. These are your Gandalfs, your Yodas, your whatever the mentor in the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Like these are those sort of folks on your for you. You don't have to be living, although it's better if they're living, right? And the thing about your guides is they always say things like, remember who you are. And you're like, what the hell does that mean, bro? And then in that moment, when you're faced with a dilemma, then it comes back up. You're like, oh, I get it now. So they almost always sound like fortune cookies, right? And that's a great thing. So you pull on your guides for the vision, the way they see the world. Your peers are the people who are sort of shoulder to shoulder with you. You know, those are your fellow knights, or those are your, the people going to Mount Mordor with you, like whatever that is, right? The group of people that are roughly at your same level of accomplishment and vision. These are at your peers are when people can actually start usefully collaborating with you on your projects, and you're bringing them on for the brains, right? They will help you soundboard, strategize, get into things with you. You're not pulling them on for their hands, right? Guides, peers, no hands, right? Eyes and brains, right? Supporters are the first group that you start pulling in, and where you're pulling them on for their hands. They actually do work with and for you on your project. Now, most people think of supporters, they think of teammates, they think professional stuff, but keep in mind, it could be that neighbor kid that like watches your kids twice a week so that you can go focus on doing your work. It could be, someone cutting your grass. It could be all sorts of people, right, that are supporting you to do your best work and either doing it directly or indirectly. So supporters, hands. Lastly, beneficiaries. These are the people who will be better off because you complete your project. And they are the heart of your project, and beneficiaries serve 2 points for you. The first hard point, or they serve 2 purposes. The first hard purpose, one is when you are stuck and you don't know what to build and you don't know what to do. You could spend 6 to 9 months looking on Google and wondering, or you could send an email or a text or call up Nadia and be like, hey, Nadia, I'm building a thing. Here's what I think it is. Does this work for you or not? What do you want? The person you're actually building it for can tell you. I know, revolutionary, but we don't do that nearly enough, right? I think part of it is because we think if we pull them in and we don't know what they're doing, then we're not serving them. But maybe you're serving them even better because you're showing that you're human and that you care about getting whatever you're building to them faster versus not. Second thing they do is when you get lost in the project, when you're going through that thrash crash and it's getting hard, you can remember like, wait a second, this isn't just about me. If I don't build this thing, then Melina is not better off. Like I committed to Melina that we were building this thing. She needs it. If I stop, what's she gonna do? Right? And sometimes that's just enough to get you back into the project to go a little bit further, right? And so I think too many people, when they hear this framework, they're like, I want more guides. Where are those people at? Right? You need more beneficiaries and you need to be in tighter relationship with them because trust me, they are who will get you through the project much more so than your guides will and their fortune cookie nonsense, okay? So whenever you're building out your projects, if you can't like think of a lot of guides, if people get hung up on that, that's okay. Think of more beneficiaries and how you can be in a tighter, more iterative relationship with them, and you'll be just fine.
I like the idea of including people who are kind of adjacent to your project, somebody who's making you dinner or watching the kids. So they are not actually doing tasks in your project, but they're so important for you to have the boundary and space. My mom, Lorraine, is here and she's actually, watching the dog. So he doesn't just show up on camera. She says, yeah, she's not happy about it.
Hi, Lorraine. I met Lorraine. She's wonderful.
So we are right at kind of the end, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't let people forget what's next. Megan is here. We've got Sandra here. We're going to be doing an implementation event. It's a special invitation-only program. If you've already participated in the Foundations Week or the Momentum Week, you'll be getting an email with a discount code. I got some results here on the poll. Thank you, Melina. Looks like a lot of people are ready to start finishing, but some people still have too many projects. We're going to address that in implementation class, so don't worry. And I think we actually had another poll as well. Melina, do you want to take a look and see if you can pop that one up as well? And there's a special link to actually get registered, and I wanted to advance there now. The other thing we've included is it's so important to talk to our audience, as Charlie said, that I created a survey link. So it would really be helping me if you just took the 5 minutes. You've already taken, 45 minutes to be a part of this event. If you could just fill out the survey as well. Here comes another poll. Melina's asking us how many projects are active for you typically. This is interesting. First is, what is a project? So if you need the answer to that question, that's fine. This is a safe space, but definitely come back for implementation week. 1 to 2, 3 to 5. Yeah, we've got some people here that are super overcommitted. I didn't take this poll, but yeah, I'd probably say more than 5 counts. Actively in progress is huge, guys, because I think it depends on what you consider to be active. One of the great benefits of reading this book and learning the momentum method is you can actually do a checkout and you can put your projects on a shelf. And you can thank them for their service. You may or may not come back to them later. But if you have 5 or more projects, it may make sense for you to do kind of a project audit. Charlie calls it the project cage match, if you can imagine your projects actually fighting each other. And there's a couple things that we think about when we're choosing a project. Charlie, this might be a good place to kind of send us out. So again, go to the link, register for the coffee event. If you already attended, wait for the coupon from me. And maybe we can actually help some of these folks who have 5 or more projects. Charlie, do you want to give them some advice before we set them off into the wild?
Yeah. So part of it is a conceptual trick here, is that I think a lot of times when we think about the number of projects that we're covering, that we're carrying, we're thinking at multiple levels of time perspective, right? So I would clarify it and say, how many month-sized projects are you carrying right now? Because a lot of times we can sweep some of these week-sized projects into one macro month size or one macro quarter sized. And it helps you sort of remind like, oh, these projects are actually related. And it doesn't feel like I'm doing a whole bunch of different things. I've just got a bunch of smaller projects that happen at the weekly level. So that's the conceptual bag of tricks that you have there. But what I would say on this one is, I think a lot of times we carry a lot of projects because we don't realize it, but we're hedging our bets in case some of them fail or don't turn out the way we want them to do, or we want them to turn out. So we carry a bunch just so that they don't fail. But what we realize is, or what happens is, we underinvest in all of the projects because we're spread too thin. And so what I really want people to think about is, what would it be like for you if you just said, you know what, this month, I'm just going to focus on no more than 5 projects. And then next month, I can pick up all these other ones that I want to get to and fully commit and do your best work, get that autonomy, get that mastery, get that purpose, and use momentum to your advantage, as opposed to, I think, people's default, which is to carry way too many projects and feel frustrated by the lack of either progress or success, and then not really feel like they're getting anywhere, right? Way better to choose fewer projects, get successful internally and externally with them, move on to the next ones, than to carry a whole bunch that are half finished and fully frustrating.
But if you have one that's close and it has a big impact and you have the resources, would you say this is a good season to whip that out and finish strong, or
Yeah.
what's the advice there?
Yeah, if you're really talking about this period of time, look, September usually is a transition month, right? Back to school, back to work. So it normally goes there. October is the last full groove month of the year, y'all, because then we go into Thanksgiving, or we go into November and December, where you start talking about having 3 work weeks and then you have 2 work weeks. So I really want people to start thinking, okay, you've got September, you've got October, and maybe a little bit in November to finish things up. What can you do to finish strong before that period? And so you say, you know what? I put another hit on that record this year, right? As opposed to just carrying a bunch of stuff and feeling like maybe you didn't knock any single thing out of the park. So absolutely, if you got one that you can finish in the next 10 weeks, get after it. Understand that you'll probably be better off winning at that one than just carrying a whole bunch of others.
Thank you. If anybody wants to get that done for less than $20, I just wanted to go ahead and recommend, I have here the printed Momentum Planner, but the digital pack is available now on Charlie's website. Melina, if you have that link handy, just to put the GCP Coffee page, the resource page is actually linked there. But it actually helps you break out your projects by the month, the week, and also the day. And so again, these are available digitally, so you can make that epic progress. And there's a whole email series which helps you understand how to use these. I just noticed that they were on sale. Not only do you get the full version for next year, you get a half of the year for this year as well. Charlie, I got another email today too, and it's kind of timely. I'd like to just make sure everyone on the call knows Charlie does, private coaching, but he also does a lot of group workshops. I've been to 2 group workshops in 2020 called the Momentum Day. It's a full day to plan your projects. The next one's coming up September 19th.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is so timely is if you register by, is it midnight tonight, you actually can save $20. So I'm going to make sure that everybody has that link.
Mm-hmm.
So that program is one of the premier programs that Charlie offers, but it's worth every penny. It's all recorded, and you get a series of worksheets that help you implement. And then, like I said, if you save $20 and you want to, come to my session, I am doing a session on September 9th, and I'm happy to get you involved. Just contact me if you want to learn more about, and also go to that website as well. Melina, did we have one more poll just to send us out? She's really good at these
There
polls.
there were only 3 polls.
All right.
So
Tell
that was-
me, is there any unturned question that we should definitely answer before we let Charlie free?
There's one from Violet that said it's so hard to commit to a project. What's the process for changing one on your list?
So changing it you could change things in 3 ways. One is you can just drop it because you realize it's no longer serving you in the way that it started. And that one is sometimes super important for projects we committed to like 18 months or 24 months ago, and that we're just hung on to because we're like, I said I was going to do it. It may not be relevant, right? I've worked with so many people, y'all, who were they were stressing out about finishing a project to get them to the place they already were, right? They're like, I need to do the thing to get to the place. And I'm like, you're already at the place. So what's the thing doing for you? It's like, I said I was going to do it. So first, you can just drop things. And that doesn't mean you're a slacker. That doesn't mean you don't have it, right? It means that you're using this limited time, energy, and attention you have now to build the bridge to the future that you want to be in. And all the time that you spend on projects that are not building you the bridge to the future you want to be in, is all that energy is displacing the projects that could. So drop them. Yes, I said it, drop it.
Thank you.
2 is you can defer it, right? And say, you know what? Now is not the time, not just because it's hard, but just because it's like, you know what? This time, for instance, I can be super brief on this. Summertime is actually my low creative period of the year, right? I know not to commit to big creative projects in the summer because I'm not going to want to do it. So if I'm in the middle of the summer and I'm like, you know what, I got this project, I don't know what to do. It's like, oh, it's this big creative project. How about I wait for the fall to where I get in the flow and I do it then? That makes better sense of doing it. So you can defer it, right? And then the last thing that people don't think about enough is you can rescope it, right? I think a lot of times what happens is we take on a big project. It seems easy, or it seems like it's going to take a month. You go a little bit into it, you're like, oh, buddy, this is going to be like a year. What do I do with that? It's overwhelming. You could rescope it and just say, you know what, I'm going to focus on this 1 month piece of it. Or, you know what, I can't even do that. I'm just going to say I'm going to spend 2 focus blocks a week on it, right? I'm just going to push it forward and go forward and switch it from it's got to be done by September to, you know what, working on it and getting progress on it is better than not. I'm going to focus on that. So I'd say those are 3 sort of go-tos. You can just drop it, right? You can defer it, or you can rescope it.
Yeah, we definitely have rescoped a few things on this project team specifically. Jennifer, if you could see her face right now, she's probably crying and laughing. It's a little bit of both. We started this project in July, and I'm excited to be running this victory lap with you all tonight. We'll continue the project because we've rescoped it. We do tend to move the goalpost, but because we're really vigilant about mapping out all those versions. But I think for tonight we have gone over, and I want to make sure people get on to their next programmed activity. There's something we didn't say, and I would really be remiss if I didn't say this. So I'm going to channel Charlie's wife, Angela. She's not here, but I'm pulling her into the conversation. It's great to make progress, finish your work, change the world, but it's also great to hibernate and make self-care your project and do what you need for your family or your community or your work. So thank you for supporting this program, but don't feel that you have to choose a project or even have to deliver anything. I want to let you know that the year is half over, and if you just take this time to look back at what you accomplished, I think there may be some grace in there for you. I think you may find some gifts of COVID. You may find that you might not have done what you set out to do, but you have a lot to be proud of. The decisions that you made when you actually had to grab everything really quickly and then transition to home, and you had to become a teacher for your children. I just think one place that we could leave tonight is in a place of, just taking stock. We call that a deja vu. Yeah. So it's like you go backwards. Deja brew is what we call it. That's it. It's a coffee shop, right? So we always, when we do our quarterly review meetings, we start with that look back because it's a really great place to get your energy set. And then from there, you can decide, I've done enough. I'm going to take the rest of the year off. Or you can, double down and do something else. And there's room in the cafe and in our series and in your life for both of those. And I just wanted to give you that permission slip. If you need it, you can just write it down and, you don't have to do anything more in 2020. But if you're ready and you want to learn this method, we're here to help and support you. Charlie, what would you add?
Radical self-care is a project. And when we look at everything we've been going through this year, many of us are needing to invest in radical self-care. Right. And so I really, really appreciate the not doing as space, because again, people come to me for get more done and things like that. And everyone who's around knows that I'll push back and say, actually, maybe we need to make more room for you. Maybe we need to make more room for recovery. Maybe we need to make more room to figure out how we're going to celebrate this holiday season in COVID times. And that's going to be something new because none of us have done this in a pandemic before, at least not in the United States, right? So yeah, all of those things take time, energy, and attention, which means they're projects. And the most, I think, radical thing that so many of the viewers on this call can do is say, you know what? I'm not going to add another professional project to the plate. I'm going to add a personal project, and that personal project is me. So absolutely. Thanks for ending that, because ending on that one, because again, we can spend a lot of our lives chasing and doing stuff for other people and building, ladders and leaning them against walls that, we didn't want to climb the ladder. We don't want to be against that wall. So take this time to really invest and understand that that's probably, maybe the most important thing that you can do to finish this year strong and set yourself up for a really powerful 2021.
I don't think we need to say anything more. I want to thank you, Charlie, for taking time out of your schedule, making the commitment to come and share this knowledge. And then beyond Charlie, it's important that I acknowledge the volunteers who made this event possible. We had about 20 people working behind the scenes. So just a huge thanks to the GCP Cafe team. What we do is possible because of the margin that you've given to me and this group. So thank you for believing and bringing this event forward. So. All right, well, we'll find you at Momentum Day. And like I said, if you guys want to join us at GCP Cafe, there's the link. And your feedback means a lot. We use that and we improve our future events. And we can always keep you updated on future events at that link as well.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. I'll end the webinar here.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Melina.
Thank you. That was great. Let me see, do you need me to screenshot any of this for you, or will it